Long way here. Thankful that Steve sang that song this time because I've been memorizing those words again all year. You know, I know we see February as the month of love, and we have the Valentines and all of that, and we promote it. But February actually has a more ancient meaning that I'm going to talk about. You know that our months come from the Romans. And early on, they were an agricultural culture. And so they used the months, of course, to mark off the important days for agriculture, when you plant, when you plow, all of these sort of things. And in winter, there weren't any important days for agriculture. So they just had winter. They didn't have any months then, and they only had 10 months for the year. And the last of those months was February. And what it was the month that you prepared for the new year to come. Because it's named February out of the Ides of February, the middle of February, which was februm, coming from februa, meaning to purify. So February is originally, and what its name means, is the month of purification. And you know, all religions have had purification rituals for thousands of years. Most of those have to do with washing with water. You wash your hands, you wash your face, you may bathe your whole body, as in baptism, of course. Among some of the Native Americans, you could only do ritual purification in a river. It had to be moving water. I suppose they thought if they were washing off all of this impurities, they didn't want them sitting there. They wanted them to move on down. So you could only do it there. And then there were whole ranges of ways of purification. You could purify with smoke and washing your body in smoke. You purified by taking different sorts of plant drugs, if you will. Often combined with chants or mantras or that sort of thing. The purification took a whole range of forms of drinking toxic substances, of shaving all of the body, all the hair off your body, of making sacrifices, including human sacrifices that were seen as a form of purification. The Hopi, the Navajo, have extensive purification rituals involving their sand paintings. And those can go on anywhere from a couple of days to a week, with numerous steps involved. And of course, the destruction of the painting representing that taking of the impurities away. So that's been extremely important to people. And this purification typically occurred when various things happened in your life. It could be when you become mature, when you're moving from a child to an adult. It could be when you do different things. If you touch the opposite sex, you may have to purify yourself. Before you go into church, before you have a ritual, if you touch blood or a corpse or any number of things. If you give birth to a child, you have to be purified. For several hundred years, many of the churches had it where a new mother had to be churched. That was the term. And you weren't supposed to go outside to do anything until you had gone into church and gone through this cleansing ritual. In fact, in Ireland, what they believed was that a new mother was particularly attractive to the fairies. So if she went wandering around before she had been ritually purified, churched, then the fairies were very likely to kidnap her. So these rituals played many different roles. typically with things that people would do, but not always. I mean, people have felt they needed to purify themselves just for being human. That the human condition itself is impure. It's dirty, it's defiling to such an extent that they would flog themselves, wear hair clothing, which is where you wear it with the, like a fur with the hair on the inside. Major deprivations of themselves, including self-mutilation and other types of activities, trying to purify themselves. So what's happening in this process, of course, is that we are saying that you can purify the spirit by purifying the body. And is that true? Is there a connection between the body through the spirit that would purify the spirit? Now we know that that connection's there. I take it as an absolute fact that there is a connection between the spirit to the mind to the body. And the reason is, not all scientists would agree with it, but I think there's overwhelming evidence. We talk about it up here all the time. We can give example after example after example where spiritual treatment has helped people physically. I've talked about my nephew who had leukemia, a type of leukemia that would be fatal within probably a year or so. And he had to get a bone marrow transplant. Many of us, I know Angie was one of the main ones, but many of us did treatments for him. But he in effect did treatments for himself, although he didn't know it by that name. But when this happened, he and his wife agreed they would be positive all of the time, no matter what. He said to all of his friends, send me cards, but only funny cards. It's the only kind I want from you. He would post them. They would rent movies and watch them, but only funny movies that were happy movies. Well, he's out. He still has to go back and be checked every 2 weeks. The doctors, who have done this for many, many years, of course, have said he's their best patient ever. So there's something that works. I talked about my sister and the financial straits they were put in because of all of the strain. They had to pay premiums and they had to travel to Phoenix regularly, all of this. And she just got money in the mail. But when he had been through with the main part of the work, she says, I need to go back to work. She's 62 years old, baby sister, of course. And she said, I need to go back to work, but she had been looking for work before that, and I mean, it's a little hard to find when you're 62. She had done accounting in a sort of, she's not an accountant or anything, but had kept books for people. And this friend of hers said, well, my husband, I think, is going to need somebody, but that didn't work. And she said, I'm going to be positive about it. That's it. I'm just going to say, this is going to work out. And then her daughter was working with somebody, heard them talking about this construction business, small business that needed some accounting help. And she said, she was telling me when she had gone in before, she'd gone in a couple of years ago for interviews for these accounting, and she was always very hesitant, and they always had new systems, and she would spend more of her time telling them how she couldn't do it. Amazingly, she didn't get the job. And she said she just went in there and just opened up and said, well, yeah, I've done QuickBooks. You have this other system. I don't know it, but I think I can do it. It's going to work out. Well, she got the job immediately. $16 an hour, more than she's ever made in her life. Part-time, and they're starting to give her so much work, she's going to try to get my other sister on to take up part of the load. I mean, these things happen, some say by chance, some say it's just luck, you happen to be in the right place, but there's too many of them. I mean, it's just simple logic. There's too many of them. There is a connection from spirit to mind to body. Now, if that connection's there, then it would seem logical that it flows the other way too. So we can say that there's connection from body, mind to spirit, but does that mean purification rituals purify your spirit? Now I know that there are some who talk about healing their spirit, talk about broken spirits, defiled spirits, but I don't believe it. To me, spirit is divine spirit, whether we're talking about our own or we're talking in the larger sense. Divine spirit is not impure by definition. It can't be. Once you start looking at an impure, a defiled spirit, you're talking about Satan and Lucifer and evil that exists, which does not occur. When I say it, we know it's correct, so that pretty much settles that issue. So if we know the connection is there, we know that body-mind-spirit connection is there, but we also know our spirits are divine, they're pure, then does purification not work? Well, again, I think you can look at too many instances where good purification rituals work, just to say that it doesn't work. So what is it that's being purified? And what it is the connection. We're talking about the body-mind-spirit connection, and it's the connection that gets dirty, that gets defiled, that gets clogged up. And how do we do that? Well, we've all seen it. It's a thing we learn. When you get hurt by someone, you start putting up defenses. And if you're hurt very much, then pretty much you draw back. You might have fear and anxiety and anger and hatred, and all of those things are this wall that you're building to protect yourself from pain, from being hurt. But what do they lead to? More pain and more hurt, because you're isolated, because you can't interact with people in a positive way. We've seen those people who are always fearful, who are attacking others, and you can see the pain in them. And so this very system we devise to protect ourselves instead hurts us. And that's the same thing with our spiritual life. These things that we've devised in our mind to protect us instead clog up the system. And so when you purify, you're not purifying your spirit, but you are purifying. You're cleansing that connection to spirit. And how do we do that? Well, you can start with the body, with a physical purification. I would suggest that's not necessary, but if it helps, that's okay. Because it's the mental connection that we purify. And we do that by returning to the beginning, by returning to the source. Because when we were babies, we were open. And we were connected to everything. You know that a very little baby does not distinguish between themselves and their surroundings. So when we say we are one, we may believe that cognitively. Do we live it? Do we feel it? Is that connection an absolute intricate part of our being? And that's what that mental return to the beginning does. And generally we do that through meditation. Through whatever system we have of clearing our mind from all of these impurities. All of these things that we build up and we've got on and we've clutched and we've put all around us to protect it.